Camera's rolling.
Baby, I'm too young to know any better, but I guess I'm just too old to care. I'm waiting on the morning light to clear the air. Never say it's wrong with regret, letting go that you pay flags. All the silence that keep me coming back. I'm the one that you hated. You know, the one you didn't want to believe. The one that you hated. Take a look at it now. I'm the one that you created. The one that you hated. Never say it's wrong with regret, letting go that you pay flags. All the silence that keep me coming back. I'm the one that you hated. You know, the one you didn't want to believe. The one that you hated. Take a look at it now. I'm the one that you.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Dad Talk Today. Hope you are doing well. Do me a favor really quick. Many ways that you can support this show down at the bottom. Dad Talk Today, no spaces, Cash App, Venmo, Patreon. We got super chats and memberships over on YouTube, and the same thing for Facebook. Please like, share, subscribe. Ding that bell so you get the notifications for when we're going live. Got to talk to this gentleman last week. I'm looking forward to this. We got Mr. Joseph Robert, the fantasy football counselor, with us today. What's going on, brother?
Thanks for having me on the show, Eric.
Yeah, man. So tell us about your podcast. What is it that you do over at the podcast?
Well, I help people manage their virtual team. So if you guys aren't familiar with fantasy football, I mean, a lot of people are at this point. 60 million people played across North America. They basically draft a virtual team, like real NFL players on their team, right? And they manage the league, and you can do this for, cash prizes, or you can get together for bragging rights with your friends, your buddies, girls, whoever's in the league. And it's a lot of fun, but it's basically like you and I probably can't buy $1 billion team today. So this is the next best thing. And I help people pick the best possible teams.
Yeah, man. What are some of the things that you've gotten to do? I would think there's a lot of freedom with having a podcast. I'm sure you're having many conversations that they might not hear on the ESPN. Tell everybody a little bit about what goes on your show.
Well, I'm a little bit different from the mainstream. So what happens every year, guys, is that basically these players finish on top. Let's say Tom Brady finishes as a top 10 quarterback. What happens in next year is the mainstream consensus comes out with a list that's really predicated on last year's rankings. They say, hey, these guys finished on top last year. Let's draft them again in this order. I stray away from that. I say, listen, let's think outside the box, okay? It's very unlikely they're going to finish on top 2 years in a row. So I'm more of a truth speaker. I tell players, literally, I've had it out with NFL players. And I tell them, hey, you guys suck. You had a bad performance. You're not performing, because fantasy is directly proportional to reality. I tell them, hey, you guys aren't performing. And, I'm a little bit more to the truth of like, I call it how it is. And I guess I ruffle some feathers in the mainstream by doing that.
Have you heard from any of those football players that get a little mad at what you're saying?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you guys look up Josh Jacobs, he was in my DM a couple years ago. I had said that he sucked in a performance, and he says, you could pull up, where I'm at, C-U-H, where I'm at, come pull up, and we're going to fight. And I said, hey, man, if you want to box, I have an MMA background. I'm down, man. And then he basically just blocked me. So I get a lot of DMs, and even just people in the like NFL players in the comments saying, coming at me because I'm bruising a lot of egos, right? It happens.
Yeah, there's definitely egos attached, talking about the football and the MMA background. I'm sure there's a lot of people that think what you're doing right now promotes toxic masculinity. What's your thoughts on this whole myth of the toxic masculinity that we're hearing in society right now?
I don't have the exact saying, but isn't it like weak men create hard times, strong men create good times? I don't know the whole quote, but you need strong men. I think that's very important. And what the mainstream is doing is, again, this is a whole conversation here, but you need strong men. You need leaders. You need people to fight wars if that comes down to, or just being great fathers. You need strong men to lead. And that's just, it's very important. I just find that right now there's just a dumbification. I don't even know if that's a word. There's a dumbing down of males, and it just sucks. I'm trying to, we've got to bring strong men back, or keep the strong men that we have, and grow children to continue to be strong men. And that's very important.
Why do you think we have that dumbing down of males, and why that masculinity is being attacked? Because, it's obvious that it's happening, but why do you think we're doing that?
This is a deeper conversation. I guess it goes beyond, probably what we're talking about here, from a smaller level here. It could, this could go as far as let's weaken the West. I don't know, for a potential takeover. Is U.S. going to be the strongest country in the next 5-10 years? Maybe it's just weakening of the West in general, if you look at it from a bigger picture, but I'm not exactly sure. But we got to make sure we have strong men, because it's important for everything.
Absolutely, man. One of the things that kind of connected us when we was initially talking was about your relationship with your dad. Tell us a little bit about what your dad was to you, man, and what kind of father he was.
Very, very, very important, I think, to have that father figure in your life. And I'm very fortunate to have mine. I lost him back in 2015. Wow, time flies. 2015, suddenly to a heart attack at the age of 68 years old. So very important, very good role model. Someone there that was able to push me no matter what I did at the time. I was working a 9-to-5 sales rep, came back with a sale of $250,000 for my then employer. And he goes, that's it. That's all. That's it. You just sold, he's like, he's always that guy that was just pushing me. So a strong role model, a strong anchor in my life. And that's one of the main motivators of why I'm here today, thriving with well over 6 figures, doing what I love, which is fantasy sports, talking about fake football, which is great.
Absolutely. Pushing you to be your best. Talk about 6 figures, man. That's going to be cool to have that type of independence. Was there people that thought that you was crazy for doing something like this?
Oh, absolutely. And the bigger you get, the more haters you get. I remember I worked 9-to-5, and I worked at a grocery store when I was a teenager. That was my first job, which my dad actually helped me find that job. He used to shop at that store. He talked to the manager. My son needs to work. And that's one thing, like, we never had a lot of money growing up. He was always pushing me like, hey man, are you doing this? He always wanted me to work and earn every dollar, which was something that at the time was frustrating. Like, why don't you just, why don't you have money, Dad? Why? And, long story short, I'm going off on a tangent. I'm going so far back here, but what was the main question here?
Just talking about the independence and having this podcast. Like, I know for me, I lost my job due to nothing that to do with me. I was there for 1 month when they told us they were shutting the company down nationwide. Well, here's the deal, man. Like, I just left a job that I had been with for 6 years in order to do this, that ended up going bankrupt themselves. And I felt like I was stuck. And I have a creative element to me. I love doing what we're doing right here. And I got this idea to do Dad Talk. And I can remember early on, people thought I was crazy. I was laughed at. I was mocked. And then they're some of my biggest fans now, seeing how far we've come along and some of the things that we've done. But I know when you step outside of that norm, you need that 9-to-5, you need this structure and stuff. When you become that person that's different, a lot of people will criticize that. And I would just, I don't know if you went through that. I could just assume that you probably did.
Right. So I went off on a tangent because I was going back to my old jobs and what I did. So what I was trying to get to was I had people that I work with in the past, right?
Yeah.
Approached me like on social media. I had to end up blocking them, saying, who are you to talk about fantasy football? Like, you were basically, again, I'm not knocking anybody working a 9-to-5 because I did that my whole life. I was just fortunate enough to get to where I am because I worked really super hard, right? I'm no different from anybody else. I just worked really hard to get where I got. So what I'm saying is that, like, these people came back to me and said, hey man, who are you? Why are you doing this? And you're just a guy that worked with me at the grocery store. You were just a guy that worked in the office, with us at 9-to-5. We commuted together. So there's a lot of jealousy, a lot of envy happening, the bigger you get. And it's kind of a tough place to be right now because I'm kind of in the middle, right? Like, there's the mainstream level, right? These top guys that get paid millions of dollars doing what they do. I'm an independent. And then you got these guys that, that worked with me before, and just the haters that try to, they're trying to pull me down here, and the guys on top, supposedly, the mainstream, are trying to keep and push me down. So I'm kind of in this area where I'm just trying to do a major breakthrough. I'm at the brink of this major breakthrough right now.
Absolutely, man. We got a question in here that from Mike Whitney. He said, "So, what do you think about the woke, racial, socio-political, feminist agenda that the NFL seems to be pushing more and more every year?" I know that has been a point of contention for many people. It seems like there's been a lot of agendas that has made its way inside of sports.
Yeah, I mean, it's pissing a lot of people off for sure. You can see it in the comments when the NFL or NBA posts certain things. You just saw the Ivan guy with the where he just didn't want to wear the jersey, and I did a post on that. I don't have any problem talking about that. I say do what you want, right? I'm all for if you want to. If you want to choose whatever gender you want to be with, that's totally fine. But it's just like if I don't want to wear a jersey, I shouldn't be criticized for it. It's that simple, right? So it comes down to like, people are, I think there's a big silent majority that doesn't say anything, but it's there. The platform is there and people just love football and they can't completely alienate themselves from their outlet, which is football and fantasy football. So I think that's why people stay watching, right? But it is getting crazy. And I think there's this woke mob and it's kind of this narrative that everyone's following and everybody doesn't want to be canceled and stuff like that. And I kind of understand that, but I just don't think people should be criticized for, just doing what they want to do.
The crazy thing about it is politics is so divided right now. Our country, our world is so divided. And it's the outlets like football, basketball, whether music, whatever it is, this is your outlet to get away from all of that. Unfortunately, It seems like it's even made its way inside of there. And people are saying we can't get away from it anywhere. Would it not be too hard just to keep that kind of stuff out of there?
It would be nice, and I don't know, has it gone so far that it's going to swing back around and go back to the Al Bundy days? I hope it does, because I was watching some clips of Married with Children, and I'm just like, I miss this time where people didn't take everything so seriously and everybody wasn't so hypersensitive. Again, is it going to stop? I don't know. Like, I hope so. I hope that everybody just let's play ball, right? I hope we get back to that because it is affecting a lot of people, moods. It's creating division. And, we want to bring, sports is supposed to bring people together, not create division. I think we need to do that. Focus more on that.
Absolutely, man. And another thing is like, why hasn't Metallica or one of these bands ever been able to play at the Super Bowl?
Yeah,
that's a question we hear all the time. Like Ozzy Osbourne, they get him over there and show 10 seconds of the Ozman playing during the video playback. What's going on with that? It seems like even that has some type of agenda to it.
Yeah, I don't know too much about that and how they select the talent on stage at Super Bowls. That I don't know that much. I don't get into that.
Oh, dude, like there's been people that have been upset about that for years. That certain genre seems to get snubbed all the time. I'm a rock and roll guy. Right. But anyway, let's get back to the game, man. What are you looking at right now for the upcoming season?
I mean, we're talking like for the Super Bowl. I mean, for the next season, like for fantasy,
for the Super Bowl and the upcoming season.
Well, man, this is a whole other rabbit hole when it comes to the Super Bowl, because I don't know if you watch that last game with Cincinnati and the Chiefs, but there's a lot of talk about this game being fixed and stuff like that, and a lot of people are upset about it. If you saw that, I don't know if you saw the one. Did you watch the game by any chance or no?
I didn't.
Oh, it's a long story, but in summary, there's a lot of like questionable things that went against Cincinnati, penalty flags called against them, and they're saying the Super Bowl's fixed and stuff like that. But I don't know. Either way, it's going to be entertaining. Pat Mahomes versus the Eagles. I think the Eagles win, but you never know, man. I mean, Pat Mahomes is now the golden boy there. He is kind of the guy the NFL is pushing right now. So it's going to be an entertaining Super Bowl. In regards to next year, I don't really know from a fantasy perspective or for any type of perspective, kind of what happens, how the teams happen until after the NFL draft. Then we know when all the rookies come in and how the teams and the rosters align and how, my projections are going to be for next year. But in regards to Super Bowl coming up, I think it's going to be entertaining. But again, a lot of controversy in regards to, was this game fixed? Which again, from what I hear, the NFL can fix games from what I hear, because it's an entertainment company, but I don't know all the legalities behind that either.
They are allowed to fix the games?
That's what I'm hearing. I don't know. I mean, you think because you bet on it that they shouldn't be able to, but from what I'm hearing, that they are an entertainment company. And I think, and again, don't quote me, but I think you might be able to legally get away with it. I'm not sure, but that's what I'm hearing.
Allegedly, it's opinion. We're not saying anything
Yeah.
is fact here, but just the thought that there is an opportunity for something like that to go down, that's got to be really scary, man. You don't know what's real and what's not.
Right.
Um, talk to me about do you do college football as well?
Not really, no. So for me, I
Okay.
focus on fantasy football. So the players that come out of college, right, they're going to be fantasy relevant the year that they enter the NFL. So what really helps me determine how good they're going to be is what team they land on. So if you get a top running back coming in, if he's going in with a committee, let's say he ends up on the Bears, there's David Montgomery there. Is he going to get the volume that we want? So I really do my projections after I know where the players land.
I got you.
Yeah.
For somebody that's not familiar with that, walk us through how that fantasy football works.
Okay, very simple, guys. A lot of fun. Now you guys can get into it and try it out. I have a lot of how-tos on that on my YouTube channel and thefantasyfootballcouncil.com. So you can get a full explanation. But in summary, you have these players that play reality, right? You know, Tom Brady, Pat Mahomes, we're using example name here, right? Jonathan Taylor. You get together, you create a league with your friends, right? And you get together and say, hey, there's going to be 10 of us or 12. It's usually 10, 12, or 14 person league. You get together, you draft a team, which is essentially these real players. So I have Tom Brady, you have Pat Mahomes on your team. And when they create points in like in reality, like when they're actually playing during the season, you're accumulating your points in an app and you're competing against each other week by week. So me and you, Eric, we're going to be week one. We're playing each other. I own Mahomes, you own Brady. I have my running backs, my wide receivers. I have a full roster. My players, when they play in reality, the points accumulate and I play you that week and points get accumulated. So it's a matchup every week. So it's fake football, basically. You know, they're accumulating points in reality, but you own them as an owner on your team. It's a lot of fun.
Do any of the professionals or the owners kind of follow the fantasy football thing to see what everybody's thinking?
Well, that's another thing, right? So this has been a lot of like, what's the word? A lot of social media chatter right now because as fantasy fans, there's 60 million people plus that play fantasy across North America, fantasy sports. That's including all sports, but football is the best, the most, you know, the favorite, right? The most popular. So what happens is if a player has a lack of performance, right? People will go to him and say, oh, you sucked. Why'd you do this? And I'm a big ambassador of that too. I lead the charge. But so these players are getting upset and coaches, you kind of get coaches commenting here and there. And they say stuff like, oh, we don't care about your fantasy team, right? We just want to win, right? So there is this like, you know, it's crossing the fantasy's kind of crossing the path of reality at this point.
I got you. When did the whole fantasy football thing start?
Oh man, I started playing it hardcore probably around 2010. I got really into it, but I think it goes back to like the 80s, right? I haven't even looked back too much. I should know I'm like one of the biggest personalities in fantasy sports. It goes back. I mean, it was before you were able to do it virtually and you had these apps where that had the points. People would just do it manually. You know, I couldn't even tell you how far back, probably the 80s, I guess.
Yeah, this thing kind of started out small and it's taken off. How big is this actually?
We're talking, I couldn't even tell you, probably it's a $10 billion industry. It's in the billions in regards to the value of it because you've got the daily fantasy like DraftKings and FanDuel that host the betting aspect of fantasy where you pick the players and you bet on it for that week. You know, it's a kind of a weekly thing. It's not a year long with your friends. So there's daily fantasy and there's yearly, and that's where a lot of the money is generated. And the average fantasy football fan spends at least $400. We're talking league entry fees, prizes, you know, bragging rights, all that stuff. So, you know, you're again, we're talking 60 million people plus play it right across North America. And then I know I have fans from Australia, England, across the world. And then we're talking at least $8 to $10 billion flows through just fantasy. It's massive.
Absolutely, man. I mean, you know, we talk about a lot of the challenges that these dads and these fathers are facing, whether it's divorce or accusations, whatever. I know that there's so much that's going out there. And when they're going through this, it's very hard for them to get these challenges off their mind. We're in that daily grind. We're stuck in it. It is good to have outlets like this, guys, to where you can kind of get away from that every once in a while. I'm just curious, Joe, what are some of the positives that you've seen from being able to be involved in this?
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely an outlet, right? So a lot of people, and I try to tell people, if you can break out of the 9 to 5, do it, build a side hustle, do what you love, because life is short. Like it's long to some degree, but overall in the big picture, you want to be doing what you love, right? So I tell people to break out of 9 to 5. Now, most people aren't able to do that for whatever reason at that point in their life. So yeah, it is an outlet. I've had stories where people in the military that are, stationed out wherever they're stationed out message me, say, hey man, like, can you tell me who to start? Who do I play this week? Who do I draft? And to them, even from a military standpoint, it's an outlet for these soldiers that are out in the field. So it's very positive. It also brings people together and helps you watch games. Like if I own somebody on Jacksonville, like I'm not a big Miami fan, right? But if I own a player on Miami on my fantasy team, I'm more likely to watch that game. So it's bonding, it's connecting, it's community. And then if you're in a group with, let's say, your dad, for example, or your friends, there's 12 of you or 10 of you, you guys you can get together for a physical draft, right? I had one of my sponsors this year was a restaurant, Hooters, and I got together with these guys that work at the border. They're the border guys, right? That work for the U.S. border. And we were talking together. We were all together hanging out. So it's community, it's passion, it's outlet, it's excitement. It's a lot of things. It's super fun. And with that being said, like anything, you play golf, you love golf, but you miss a shot, you get frustrated. So there's some frustration too if your players don't perform that week and you lose a week.
Absolutely, man. Just having that outlet to get away from that is really, really cool, man. You talk about some of the stories of the veterans. Is this something that you hear from a lot of veterans that aren't getting to watch every game? Maybe they can still be a part of it by being in the fantasy football.
Yeah, it keeps them connected. They own their virtual team. It keeps them in the loop. They've got something to do in their off time, their downtime. They can watch their players accumulate, points, and they can be part of that community in their league. So yeah, I get those occasional DMs from veterans and people that are actually in the military that are playing, and they ask me questions. I even get I won't say who, but I get NBA players messaging me all the time and saying, hey man, like I got baseball players that have messaged me before and said, hey man, like who do I start? Who do I, so it's fun. I just, I was in a celebrity league with John Brotherton. He was on Fuller House. The guy that played Superman. I can't remember his name, man. Tyler Hoechlin, I think, the most recent Superman. I was in a league with him. So there's like a celebrity league called Fantasy Football Cause, where I just recently won that league. So I'm donating my money to the Heart and Stroke Foundation. I lost my dad to a heart attack. So it's just like, celebrities come in, athletes come in. It's just great.
Yeah, talking about losing your dad from a heart attack. What's your life been like since then? Do you find those moments where you're just wanting to go to him for some of that advice and it's just not there?
Yeah, that's tough, So yeah, it's not, there's not a day that goes by you don't think of him, for sure. So I don't know if anyone here has lost a dad. It's especially someone that you've been close to, right? So there's not a day that goes by you really don't think of them. So that, so sometimes when you like think of like what would they say, you kind of think like what would dad do in this case? And there's words that, if you from a dad perspective, there's things that they said in life that, at then you didn't know then what you know now to some degree, right? Like they'd say stuff like, hey, Joe, be careful. There's a lot of suckers in the world, right? Like he'd say stuff like that old school, like, and I didn't get like suckers. What does he mean by that? And it makes sense now, right? There's a lot of people that'll, try to hit on your wife or try to like take your money or try to stab you in the back in business, whatever. And I see stuff that they'd say that now, and I try to, kind of do things like, what would dad do in this case? And it really helps me. But I feel that spiritually, you see him in your dreams, you're still connected, I really do.
So you said you started this in 2016 and he died in 2015.
Yeah, well, at the time, so long story, interesting story. So what happened was, before I realized I was a personality, right? I thought I was coming up with a league. So what happens in fantasy football is you get a championship trophy. I came up with this bright idea that you get a frame instead, and you can engrave it and you put sports cards in the frame as a league prize. And at the time, I didn't have a big brand behind me. I was just kind of like a guy with an idea for a league prize for fantasy because I love fantasy. So he was actually helping me sort sports cards and put them in these frames. And the business wasn't really going. And I was just like, the frame business. And he'd always ask me, right? I'd do my 9 to 5, I'd come home. Hey, Joe, how's the frame business? Like, yeah, it's not really going. And he really wanted me to succeed, but it never happened. So as soon as he passed away, and sometimes pain is a driver, right? It's a major driver, right? So as soon as I lost, I'm like, I had my time to cry and all that. I'm like, I can do more with this. So I started this. My friend had me on for a podcast. I'm like, hey man, what is this podcast? Like, I didn't know what it was really. I kind of had an idea. so I did a podcast with him, and then I'm like, I could just do my own podcast. So I started out, and the downloads weren't there. I was lucky to get 300 downloads within like a 6-week time period, right? But it was that perseverance, and it was the voice in his head. And I remember playing baseball as a kid, and he'd be like, hustle, Joe, hustle around the bases. And you can hear the voice in your head still. It's amazing. And it was just like, go for it, go for it. And that's the perseverance. His voice has persevered me through learning how to edit a podcast, grow it. And again, now I'm still not where I want to be, but we're talking, almost 500,000 plus followers across all social media platforms, millions upon millions of downloads. I'm very just grateful. But again, it's that voice in the head of like, keep going, keep showing up. And he was a big driver of that.
I'm sure you've had those times when doing the podcast, you got your highs and you got your lows. And there's times it's like, man, the creative element, every once in a while, you start getting that creative block. Like, what am I going to talk about next? What am I going to do? I'm not too sure where I'm going. And that consistency is what it takes. It takes showing up every day, making sure you're making that content. But what are some of the challenges that you've had in doing your podcast?
Oh, there's so much. I mean, just from the hater standpoint, it's just having a thick skin to overcome the haters. Because once you start leveling up, they start showing up. I've had a ton of DMs like, go, off yourself. You're a piece of garbage. Who are you? You have no business talking about fantasy. So after you like kind of get over that and you're like, okay, you get desensitized to it. It doesn't even faze me anymore. Then it's like, okay, then it's all the logistics. Like, okay, how do I edit a podcast? And even now, man, like I just had my lighting fixed in here. Like I had a guy about the proper like key. I learned about key lighting. Like I didn't know about key lighting to like 5 years, like 6 years into this thing or 7 years. I don't know where we're at now, losing track. 7 years. But what I'm saying is that you're always learning. But there's times where I wanted to grab this mic and just launch it across the room because I'm editing and my Adobe freezes. I'm like, what? Like, I do this every day. Why are you like doing this right now? And I'm like, 10 minutes, 20 minutes into the editing. I was like, I just don't have time for this. So it's like, there's like little things that like anyone else would have quit at this point. And there's like, as big as I am, I'm the biggest face in fantasy, yet the mainstream doesn't give me that recognition because they work for a network. And by doing that, they're saying to their network guy that like, why would we give this guy clout? He's bigger than, we don't want this guy to get any exposure, right? So the networks are just kind of like blacklisting me or whatever. I'm the black sheep of the industry. And it's like, it's okay because it just keeps driving me to do even better. So it is what it is. But there's tons of challenges that anyone else, I think, in my position would have probably quit at this point.
People don't see the hours of editing that it takes to do this. I always say that the majority of the work is going to be in the editing booth. And it seems like when you got that really important timeline, that crunch that you got to get that out, that's usually when your stuff starts messing up. Right. Or when you're live. Right. I've been through that. Well, let's get back to the haters. Don't want to give them too much time. Don't want to give them too much here. And they're everywhere. I've got them myself. But why do you think they do that so much? Is it just jealousy of the success? What do you think's behind that?
Well, I've done a lot of psychology studying on this stuff, heard a lot, looked at behavior and how to react to it. A lot of it is 100% jealousy. They just don't want to, like, they don't have the drive to do what you're doing, especially for a person like me. I can definitely see why jealousy would be there because, they're working a 9 to 5, right? And it's like, I was doing that, but they don't realize that I did that for years. I did that for 14 years. I worked the worst jobs. So I was a dishwasher, right? So a lot of it is jealousy. And, they just want to kind of bring you down to where they are. If they're down and lonely, they want to bring you there and they'll do anything they can to push your buttons. And I'll give you a quick example since we're talking about dads. They'll know about my dad's story and they'll come at me and take jabs at that, which is like the lowest thing you could do. How could you? The man is dead and you disrespect him. And like, I could just get angry, right? I could get angry and lash out, but they're going to just use that towards me. So,
what they want.
So I'll say stuff like, man, you need to find Jesus, or are you okay? A good one is, are you okay? Because they need to like check with themselves. Like they took the time out of their day to do that. So there's a lot of despicable stuff. I remember I have 2 young kids. I was doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu with my kid on a post. I was just teaching, he's like 2 years old at the time. Right. And I was doing Brazilian. I'm like, hey, like, I'm just like kind of like playing with him. And of course, like just wrestling with him, but he was coming at me and I'm just like, turtling like this. I posted that on my Instagram I had a couple DMs say like wishing bad on my kid. And then I was just like, at that point, I was just like, my blood was, I'm like, I'm just not going to post my kids anymore because people are sick. Like there's some sick stuff. I have a daughter too. And then someone said that they wished bad stuff upon her. I won't even say it because I can't even repeat it. And she's 4 years old. And I posted her once in my story mode saying, I wish she dies and all. Like, I just can't even repeat it. Right. Like, so again, with haters, you just kind of got to have a thick skin. But there's a lot of sick people out there, man, a lot of crazy people. And my advice to those people is like, get a life, go do something with yourself, do work on self-improvement, help yourself because, you know, no one's going to help you, man. No one's coming to save you, man. You got to do it yourself.
That's some of the downsides in this, especially with me being Dad Talk. I do what I do because of my family and because I'm a proud father. At the same time, my wife, she ain't been on the show. She doesn't want to be on the show. And my kids, I used to try to talk about them, but it got to the point to where I don't want them on the screen because of some of this. I mean, this internet, it can get dangerous, man. Yeah. It can really get dangerous. The fact that somebody would even say something like that about your kids, it's despicable. But were these other content creators that were doing this?
What? No, these are just randoms.
Just like randoms. Okay.
Yeah.
There's one thing I've seen. So go ahead.
No, other content creators dislike me though. I'm like the black sheep of the fantasy industry. That it is what it is because again, I break the narrative. So their narrative is these players finished on top last year. They're going to finish on top this year, and they monetize playing it safe, right? Because you can't go wrong by saying, "Well, that guy had a good year this year. Draft him again. Pick this player." Whereas me, I'm like, you know what? No. Like example, Cooper Kupp. He's a Rams player. He was a top receiver last year in 2022. Going into 2023, 2021, 2022, everyone said, hey, draft this guy first. I'm like, no, hold on a second. He had a pinnacle year, record breaking. He's 100% going to either decline or get hurt. So when he got hurt, I said, I told you injuries have factor in fantasy. This went on Twitter. It got, I don't know, a couple 100,000 views. People were ripping me. You're a piece of garbage. How could you wish injury? I'm like, I'm not wishing injury, man. I'm just saying that there's a probability that he's going to get hurt or decline or what goes up must come down. Law of averages. I factor all this stuff in where other people don't. So I got ripped into by everybody in the mainstream fantasy industry came at me saying I'm a piece of garbage and I should go to hell because I wished injury. But again, being soft again, going back to that conversation, the guy twisted his ankle. It's not like he broke his neck and he's paralyzed for the rest of his life. He broke his ankle. And again, I'm not downplaying an ankle injury, but these guys were ripping on me, wishing death on me because I said that injury is possible. And I was right that he was going to decline. Not that I'm happy that he got hurt. And so, yeah, I get hit from every angle for just speaking the truth. It's crazy.
I can understand, man. What are some of the other things that you factor in when you're making these predictions or doing this fantasy with the leagues?
What do I factor in? So when you look at a player and you want to draft him, you got to take a look at youth. He's got to be young. He's got to be talented. I take a look at talent. I take a look at volume and opportunity. Where is he? What team is he on? How is the surrounding cast? So there's many variables. I've got a thing called the Cuddy system, which I created. Consistency, upside, durability, depth, and youth. All factors and criteria that I factor in on picking that player. And that's where I created that 16-round draft solution where I give you all the optimal players to draft in each round based on the criteria that I just briefly went over right there. But again, no one else is doing that. No one's putting their neck online saying this top player last year was finished on top, but he's going to decline this year. They're just scared. They're fearful of being wrong and the repercussions. And I'm not 100% right, but I'm more right than wrong. And I don't cookie cutter.
Oh, I got you, man. I mean, you're talking about that with the ankle. What are some of the predictions that you've made that you've seen come true?
Oh, man, let's just talk about this year because it's more fresh in my mind. Like I said, the big one was the Cooper Kupp. Like I said, just stay away from him. He's going to get hurt or, decline. Another one was Jonathan Taylor. Like he came off in 2021, had an amazing year, like 18 to 20 touchdowns. I think it was 1,800 yards on the ground. Amazing year. Jonathan Taylor running back for the Colts. And the year after, everyone was drafting him first overall this past year that passed. And he declined. He only ended up getting 4 touchdowns. He missed a few games. It wasn't a pinnacle year. And I said, guys, Jonathan Taylor, don't draft him first overall. He's going to decline. Sure enough, he did, because the last time a running back finished 2 years in a row on top was a guy by the name of Priest Holmes in 2002, 2003. A decline's happening. So those are just an example of two of them. And then I spot breakouts like a guy named Kenneth Walker, drafted in the second round by the Seahawks. Everybody was drafting Rashad Penny ahead of him, which was the guy slated to run ahead of him. I go, Rashad Penny's been on the Seahawks for 4 years, done nothing. He sucks. Don't draft him. You're crazy, Joe. You're nuts. Kenneth Walker, he's a rookie. How do you draft Kenneth Walker? Get him for better value. Stay away from Penny. He's going to get hurt again. Sure enough, Penny gets hurt. Walker does well again. I called it, and I'm a bad guy for being honest again. It's crazy, man. I'm not a fortune teller. I'm not a time traveler, but it's just using common sense. Sometimes what goes up typically comes down, especially after a pinnacle year.
Absolutely. I got you, man. So are you a father?
Yes, father too. And yeah, it's crazy.
Oh, well,
again,
you already said that. Yeah.
Yeah. But you don't see it till you kind of have kids sometimes. And it's like, you kind of see what the dad went through. And as a kid, you're like, dad, leave me alone, right? It's like, they're looking after you. They're smarter than you, right? They're just smarter than you, but they're more knowledgeable, right? They kind of get it. But when you're 18 and you want to get out, I want to do this, I want to do that. Screw you. It's like, dude, like they're just trying to protect you and they're just trying to look after you. That's all it is,
Yeah, they weren't picking on you. They were being your parent. What are some of those lessons that you learned kind of as you got older, now that you're a father yourself? Oh, my dad wasn't picking on me. He was looking after me.
It's just, sometimes I thought they were a bit of like worry warts, like, what are you worried about? I'll be fine. But going back to what Dad said, there's a lot of suckers out there. There is, man. Like, you could trust your kid driving. Like, I trust my kid. I taught them well. They can drive, but God forbid, what if there's a drunk driver out there? It's like, I have a lack of trust to certain people, especially, just anybody, it's hard to trust.
It is
the external world. I mean, you could just try to build, and that's where, again, I think that's where a strong father role comes in, because you're building the best possible character and person out there. You're trying to equip them with the life tools to succeed in life and be aware. If you see it, I use boxing. I did some MMA and I still hit the bag often. If you can see a punch coming, at least you can maneuver and move towards that. If you have no boxing experience and you stand there, you might get hit and knocked out immediately. But if you know how to block, get your hand up, bob, weave, and, block the punch here, right? Move, dodge, weave. You're able to at least have a better chance. So it's about giving your kids the best possible chance, not only to succeed and be successful and thrive, but also to survive.
Yeah, talk about some of the positivities of the Brazilian jiu-jitsu. That's something that I would suggest, whether it's son, daughter, family, or whatever. I know that has a lot of benefits.
Yeah, I did it for years. I did a lot of the no-gi. So I hadn't done it for like literally 8 years. I went back a couple months ago to see if I still had it. I was rolling with like brown belts and blue belts. I was actually I'm probably like the longest white belt of all time. I literally had my white belt since 1996. I'm still a white belt. It's just something that like I was on and off. And usually I stick with things, right? But in this case, it was like I did MMA, and MMA, I didn't really focus on the gi. I didn't like focus towards going towards leveling up in the belt system, more just in the fighting. So I did amateur MMA in 2010, way back when, but I was more focused on the MMA aspect when I trained for 5 years steady. So I avoided kind of leveling up, but in the belt system. But jiu-jitsu, like I've tapped out black belts, I've tapped out brown belts, I've done that. So, it's very important because it gives you self-discipline, and it gives the person that's smaller in size that leverage and technique to maybe take out a guy that's bigger, right? And it also, what's amazing, it's a lot of mental toughness. So if you're grappling with a person and you're pushing it and you're at the midst of being choked out, you find ways out of it. So it gives you that real life struggle. So if God forbid, I'm giving an example, if someone breaks into your house and you get into a scuffle, I've been here. Okay. Then you can know how to maneuver and have a better chance at surviving. So it's very important mentally and physically. It's such an important thing. I'd like to get back into it myself. Right now I'm just doing the boxing just to stay in shape and some weightlifting.
Gotcha, man. What are some of your plans in the future with the fantasy football league? You got any goals or aspirations to go in a different direction with this? Kind of what's going on with that?
So my goal, again, I just think like fantasy, like full takeover of the fantasy industry next couple of years. I mean, when I say full takeover, like the dominant authority, when I say something, it sticks, right? There's a stamp. Joe says this player everybody else that's just kind of the gold standard in opinion. So that's kind of the main goal, is take over fantasy industry. And at that point, it's just, I think it's going to be a stepping stone to full takeover in sports analysis. That's kind of the goal here, is full network sports analysis. When Novak Djokovic wins the Australian Open, which he just did, one of my favorite players, a true inspiration. He's coming on the Joe Camo show, the Joseph Robert Camo show here.
Awesome, man. How do you think social media has kind of played into that whole construct of the fantasy football league?
What do you mean? Like from a fan base, or like just
fan base? I mean, like, I remember when fantasy was just kind of a small thing, and then it started taking off. I mean, one thing that was coming to mind is just like the TikToks and the Instagrams that started up a couple of years ago, the people that have the slap contest. Now they have a league of slap fighters. Like the UFC is starting their own thing. Some of these things kind of start off in their own little niche, and before you know it, they just blow up. And I would have to think that social media has played into that.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's the community is better on social media. Obviously, there's Discord groups. I chat, we talk, a lot of Q&As are answered, a lot of conversation, a lot of back and forth. But also, again, it's directing the reality aspect as well, where you can go to a player. And I'm not saying do this at all. I actually, like, I don't condone it. I don't go to players and I tell them you suck specific. I say it on my social. I'm like, I do a video about it, but I don't specifically, go to their Twitter and say, F you, too much, unless they come at me. But that's a whole other story. But a lot of people are going to these players and telling them, like, screw you, you screwed my team. So it's made it more realistic, more interactive, and it's really crossed over reality and fantasy worlds.
Absolutely, man. If anybody wanted to watch your show, they want to check out your channel, or they want to get involved with this, where would they go?
Well, you go to, I do a lot of my how-tos and stuff. You go to my website, there's thefantasyfootballcounselor.com. There's a 101 section. There's a lot of articles and videos I've done on how to win fantasy football, draft strategy, all the particulars there. If you just want my craziness, this player sucks, the wild, the truth, my Instagram at Fantasy Football Counselor, and you can find it on YouTube, TikTok, everywhere. But it's more my story mode on Instagram and more just my podcast. You get me anywhere. Just look up Fantasy Football Counselor and absorb the content. You'll have a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull that up really quick so I can show it to everybody. Here we go. Oh, this is really cool, man.
Yeah, so that's the main website. There's my 16-round draft session. If you really want all the secrets to win your league, so like, hey, I'm new to fantasy, and you join a league with a bunch of people that have played it for years, you just get 16 rounds, and then you just right up to beyond there. You'll be light years ahead of them.
Gotcha, man. Everybody, please go and check that out. Joe, I've enjoyed the conversation, man. And I wish you luck. It's neat to get to talk to other people that are doing podcasts, man. So wish you nothing but the best. And I have much hope for your family and everything. I hope you don't hear any other stuff like that. Really hurts my heart to know that people have done that, man.
It's pretty sad, it really is. But I got to say, though, I really like what you're doing, too, because I think, the men need that voice still, because, again, it seems to be suppressed. It really does. I think the strong man needs to come up. And, again, even if you look at, like, the 90s sitcoms, right? Like, I looked at, like, what's his name? I can't even, it was Regional Val Johnson from Family Matters, Carl Winslow.
Yeah.
Like, he was a strong dad figure. I don't know. I don't watch a lot of sitcoms anymore, but I don't see that family type element anymore. I grew up and I actually thought Carl Winslow was like my dad. He was like that dad I wanted, right?
Eddie Tanner.
Even him, he's this good role model, strong, an anchor to do, to go for. And now it's like, what are we doing? Are we trying to like get rid of that traditional family? Like, is that bad to have? Is that like, no, I think it's still great. Like, what I mean? We should be pushing towards that more. And it's not really talked about as much,
It's not. Like I said, I think that's by design. You don't see the shows like Andy Griffith or Family Matters or Full House or anything like that anymore. It's I think it's 100% by design. And so I think having the conversations like we had today is definitely the way to get the awareness out there. So Mr. Joseph Robert, I appreciate it, brother.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
All right, guys, we'll see y'all tomorrow. Hey, everybody, Eric Carroll here. Thank you for tuning in to another exciting episode of Dad Talk Today. While we fight for you, we would ask for you to please help fight for us. like, subscribe to our channel, and ring that bell so you get notifications every time we go live. There's also Super Chats, patreon.com/dadtalktoday, and other ways you can support our channel. Thank you for being here, and we will see you next time.